What happens when an arrogant, world-famous chef mocks an entire country's cuisine on live television? He thought no one would stand up to him, but that night, something incredible happened. Hollywood star Keanu Reeves, completely unexpected, walked onto the cooking stage, not as an actor, but as a humble guest chef. What he did next left the judges in shock, the audience on their feet, and the arrogant chef completely speechless. This is a story about respect, humility, and the power of food to bring people together. You won't believe what happened that night. Stay with me till the end. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's surprise guest, Keanu Reeves. The audience gasped. No one had expected this. It was supposed to be just another episode of the wildly popular European cooking show Global Gourmet Showdown, a high-stakes culinary competition where celebrity chefs from around the world gathered to showcase the very best of their national cuisine. The stage was grand, the lights were bright, and millions were watching live. Each week, chefs battled not only for pride, but for the honor of their country's culinary tradition. The fans loved the drama, the flavors, the beautiful dishes, but what unfolded tonight would become the most talked-about moment in the show's history. Everything began with a single interview. The French chef competing that evening was none other than Laurent Dubois, a Michelin-starred master of French cuisine, known across Europe for his precise technique and his oversized ego. Chef Laurent had built a reputation not only for his food but for his biting comments and disdain for any cuisine he deemed beneath French standards. That arrogance had earned him critics, but also plenty of attention. Earlier that afternoon, just hours before filming, Chef Laurent gave an interview that would ignite a firestorm online. Speaking to a local reporter, he scoffed at the idea of cooking against a Spanish chef. With a smug smile, he said, "Spanish food. It's just peasant dishes, olives, bread, rice. Not real cooking. Watch how a real chef does it tonight." Within minutes, the clip went viral on social media. Outrage poured in from across Spain and beyond. Spaniards, proud of their rich culinary heritage, were furious. The chef's arrogant dismissal of paella, tapas, gazpacho, the foods that tell the story of Spain, struck a nerve. The show's producers watched the storm unfold online. They had to act fast. Fortunately, fate was on their side. As it happened, Hollywood star Keanu Reeves was in Spain that very week, filming scenes for an upcoming action movie. Known for his humility, kindness, and deep respect for other cultures, Keanu had earned an almost mythical reputation in Spain, where fans adored him. On a bold whim, the producers reached out. Would Keanu be willing to make a surprise appearance as a guest competitor that night? Not necessarily to win, but to stand in quiet solidarity with Spain's culinary tradition. To their amazement, Keanu said yes. Just a few hours later, he arrived at the studio. No entourage, no airs, just Keanu, dressed simply in jeans, a black t-shirt, and an apron slung casually over his shoulder. He carried no chef's knives, no expensive gear. When asked why he agreed to join, he smiled and said, "I heard there was a little disrespect going around. I thought maybe, tonight's a good night to honor Spain instead." Word of Keanu's appearance leaked to the studio audience moments before the show began. The energy in the room was electric. Viewers at home tuned in record numbers. Social media buzzed with hashtags like hashtag Keanu vs. Laurent and hashtag RespectSpain. As the cameras rolled and the host welcomed the contestants, Laurent Dubois remained unaware of the surprise awaiting him. He stood at his gleaming station, preparing his elaborate, ultra-modern French dish, all foams, gels, and architectural precision. He looked smug, certain of victory. Then the host announced, "And tonight, we have a very special guest competitor, Keanu Reeves." The crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Chef Laurent's smile faltered for the first time. No one knew if Keanu could actually cook. But as the timer began, it became clear, this was about more than just cooking. Keanu moved calmly, respectfully. He had spent days visiting local markets and speaking with Spanish cooks. He chose to prepare a traditional dish, paella valenciana, the heart of Spanish cuisine. Every ingredient was thoughtfully selected: fragrant saffron, short-grain bomba rice, rabbit, chicken, snails, and fresh vegetables, the true, rustic soul of paella. No shortcuts. No gimmicks. When asked by the host why he chose this dish, Keanu replied softly, "Because paella tells a story of family, community, and Spain." and food should honor its story. Meanwhile, Chef Laurent watched with thinly veiled disdain. He sneered to those around him. Paella, rice and scraps. It won't impress the judges. But as the competition unfolded, something shifted. The scent of Keanu's paella began to fill the studio, warm, inviting, rich with history. Crew members stopped what they were doing just to inhale the aroma. The audience murmured with curiosity. Even the judges leaned forward in their seats. Laurent's dish, though technically perfect, felt cold by comparison. By the time the final dishes were presented, the atmosphere was electric. Keanu served his paella with a simple smile and a humble bow. "This is for the people of Spain, with gratitude." When the judges tasted it, their faces lit up. Spanish chef Maria Alvarez took several bites before setting down her fork and declaring, "Keanu, you've captured the heart of Spain tonight. This is more than a dish. It's respect on a plate." The audience leapt to their feet in applause. Laurent's masterpiece, for all its technique, tasted flat in comparison. In that moment, it didn't matter that Keanu was not a professional chef. He had cooked with sincerity, with heart. And that had triumphed over arrogance. When asked to say a few final words, Keanu simply said, "Every cuisine tells a story. When you dismiss a culture's food, you dismiss its people. Tonight, I just wanted to honor Spain, with heart, not ego." The crowd roared. The headlines the next morning would tell the story around the world. Keanu Reeves destroys arrogant chef who mocked Spain, on live TV. And that, as they say, was the true taste of respect. As the cameras began to roll, the energy in the studio shifted. The bright lights gleamed off polished counters and shining knives. On one side of the grand open kitchen, Chef Laurent Dubois stood tall, oozing confidence. His white chef's coat was crisp, the French tricolor stitched proudly onto the sleeve. He glanced around the set, flashing his trademark smug smile. This was his domain. He had done this 100 times, cooking under pressure, dazzling audiences with his mastery of modern cuisine. Laurent's dish tonight was no simple fare. He had chosen an ultramodern creation, a deconstructed French seafood bisque, presented with delicate foams, flavor-infused gels, and perfectly placed edible flowers. His counters were covered in an array of scientific-looking tools, siphon canisters, sous vide baths, liquid nitrogen. To him, cooking was not about warmth, it was about precision, about spectacle. With a quick flick of his knife, he began his work, moving briskly, theatrically, aware of the cameras following his every move. He smirked as he overheard whispers from the crew and producers. "Keanu Reeves, here. Really?" The idea of competing against an actor, no matter how famous, was laughable to him. Laurent had been trained at Le Cordon Bleu. He had earned Michelin stars. How could an amateur stand in his way? And then, Keanu Reeves entered. Dressed simply in worn jeans and a plain black t-shirt, sleeves pushed up, an apron tied casually around his waist. He carried no fancy knives, no boxes of rare ingredients. His entrance wasn't grand, but something about his presence turned heads. The chatter in the studio hushed. Cameras swiveled. The audience leaned forward. It wasn't a Hollywood movie set, but the quiet gravity Keanu carried made it feel like one. He walked to his cooking station and took a moment to survey the ingredients laid before him. Short-grain bomba rice, fresh saffron, chicken, rabbit, plum tomatoes, snails, smoky paprika, and olive oil. A large, seasoned paella pan gleamed in the center. No tricks. No gimmicks. Just raw, honest food. The host, seizing the moment, approached Keanu with a microphone and asked, "Keanu, why paella? Why this dish?" Keanu looked up, his calm gaze meeting the host's. He smiled gently and replied, voice low and thoughtful, "Because it tells a story. A story of family, of community, of Spanish heart. It's a dish meant to bring people together. That's what food is meant to do, tell a story, connect us." His words resonated in the room. Even through the cameras, audiences watching live could sense the sincerity in his tone. Chef Laurent, overhearing the exchange, couldn't resist. He threw his head back in a loud, mocking laugh. "Ah, paella. Rice and scraps. Let's see if Hollywood can even boil water." Laughter from his small entourage followed, but it was hollow. The mood in the studio shifted. The audience went quiet. The tension, now palpable, hung thick in the air. Even the judges exchanged glances. Keanu said nothing. He simply gave a small nod and turned to his station. With quiet focus, he began to cook. No flash, no flair, just methodical movements honed by care, not ego. He poured olive oil into the wide pan and gently sautéed fresh vegetables, layering in the flavors. He toasted the saffron, releasing its deep golden aroma. The smell began to drift across the room. Then the meats, carefully browned for depth. The rice was added with respect, stirred slowly to absorb the essence of the dish. As he worked, Keanu's face remained composed, thoughtful. This wasn't about showmanship. It wasn't about besting someone. It was about honoring the dish, and through it, honoring the culture of Spain. Across the kitchen, Laurent continued assembling his dramatic creation. Ingredients frozen with nitrogen, intricate gels piped with precision. It was artistry of a certain kind, but cold, distant. Meanwhile, the warmth of Keanu's paella began to fill the studio. Crew members stole glances at his pan. The rich scent of saffron and paprika wafted through the air. The audience leaned closer in their seats. Whispers began, "It smells amazing. He really knows what he's doing." Laurent noticed. His brows furrowed, his movements grew a little sharper, more hurried. He added more foam, more flair, as if to outshine what was happening across the room. But something intangible had shifted. Keanu continued cooking, unhurried, every step measured with care. He knew he wasn't a professional chef. He wasn't here to impress the critics. He was here to show respect. And as the final minutes ticked down, with both dishes nearing completion, it was clear to everyone watching. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was a quiet battle between ego and humility, between spectacle and sincerity. And in that kitchen, humility was starting to win. Keanu wasn't a professional chef, and he never claimed to be. But what he lacked in formal training, he more than made up for in respect. Respect for the craft, respect for the culture, respect for the story behind the dish. While others might have dismissed the opportunity as a fun publicity stunt, Keanu approached it differently. In the days leading up to the show, he had spent time wandering through bustling Spanish markets, talking with local vendors, and listening to their stories. He visited small family-run kitchens tucked away in quiet alleyways, where grandmothers taught him the history of their paella, passed down through generations. He stood shoulder to shoulder with local cooks, learning not just how to cook, but why. To Keanu, food wasn't just about taste, it was about connection. About honoring the hands that grew the ingredients, the traditions that shaped the dish, and the people who gathered around the table to share it. When the time came to choose his ingredients for the competition, Keanu was deliberate. He selected fragrant saffron threads, knowing their preciousness and importance in giving paella its golden hue and subtle aroma. He chose short-grain bomba rice, prized for its ability to absorb flavor without becoming mushy. Every vegetable was fresh, hand-picked at the morning market. The free-range chicken and rabbit, integral to traditional Valencian paella, came from a trusted local farm. He even included snails, honoring the original recipes of the region, knowing that this touch would resonate with those who cherished authenticity. No shortcuts. No bottled stock. No pre-made sauces. No gimmicks. Just authenticity, built from the ground up. As Keanu moved quietly in his station, the studio air began to transform. The heat of the pan coaxed out layers of aroma, the sharp brightness of tomatoes mingling with the earthiness of saffron, the smoky paprika blending with the rich, savory depth of seared meats. It was slow, careful work. Each step mattered. The sofrito, the base of the dish, had to be patiently developed, coaxing flavor from every ingredient. The rice needed precise timing. Too early and it would overcook, too late and it would remain hard at the center. Even the placement of ingredients within the wide, shallow paella pan was intentional, ensuring even cooking and the prized sauerkraut, the crispy layer of rice at the bottom that true aficionados adore. As the scent of the dish began to waft through the studio, people noticed. The camera crew, who had seen hundreds of dishes prepared on the show, started whispering to one another. "It smells amazing. He's really taking it seriously." Some leaned in subtly, catching whiffs of saffron and smoke. Even the audience, who had been dazzled earlier by Chef Laurent's flashy techniques, now found their attention drifting toward Keanu's humble station. Chef Laurent noticed, too. From across the kitchen, he glanced over with a frown. Up until now, he had treated the competition like a joke, a chance to show off against a Hollywood actor. But something was changing. He tried to refocus, meticulously piping yet another foam onto his intricate dish. But no amount of modernist flair could compete with the deep, comforting aroma now filling the room. It wasn't just about technique anymore. It was about soul. Keanu moved with quiet determination, fully absorbed in the process. His movements were calm, precise, but never rushed. There was a flow to his work, almost meditative. It was clear to everyone watching, he wasn't here to win a trophy. He was here to honor the dish. And through it, to honor Spain. The atmosphere in the studio shifted. The earlier tension, sparked by Chef Laurent's arrogance, began to dissolve, replaced by a growing sense of curiosity and respect. Judges leaned forward in their seats, observing not just the food, but the man preparing it. There was an authenticity in Keanu's approach that couldn't be faked. No ego, no competition, just genuine reverence for the tradition he was stepping into. And as the final stages of the cooking drew near, the difference between the two competitors became clear. On one side, Chef Laurent stood amid a sea of gadgets and powders, constructing a dish that looked stunning but lacked warmth. On the other side, Keanu stood at his simple station, creating a dish that smelled of home, of history, of heart. And in that moment, even before a single bite was taken, one truth became undeniable. There are some things in cooking, and in life, that technique alone can never replace. Time was up. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the timer sounded with a loud buzz. The energy in the room was electric. For the past hour, an entire nation had been glued to their screens, watching what had started as a simple cooking competition turn into something far more meaningful, a moment of cultural pride, humility, and respect. The judges, seated at a long table draped in white linen, prepared for the tasting. At the center sat the evening's guest of honor, the world-famous Spanish chef, Maria Alvarez, a culinary legend known not only in Spain but across Europe for her mastery of traditional Spanish cuisine. Her stern yet fair judging style had earned her deep respect in the culinary world. Her opinion would carry great weight tonight. Chef Laurent was called forward first. His assistants carefully plated his creation, a visually stunning dish that looked like something from an avant-garde art gallery. The components were intricate, delicate foams perched atop gelled spheres of seafood reduction, flowers arranged in symmetrical patterns, tiny droplets of vibrant sauces placed with the precision of a jeweler. As the plate was set before the judges, Laurent stepped forward, chin high, voice steady. "Tonight, I present to you my modern interpretation of French seafood bisque, deconstructed, refined, elevated." There was a pause as the judges observed the plate. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the meticulous artistry. But artistry alone would not win the night. The judges tasted. Forks moved gracefully, lifting portions of foam and gel. The flavors, while technically sound, seemed disconnected, cold, lacking the warmth that comes from a dish rooted in tradition and heart. Chef Maria's brow furrowed slightly. She set her fork down gently, offering no words, just a polite nod of acknowledgement. Next, it was Keanu's turn. He approached quietly, without fanfare, carrying the large paella pan himself. The rustic beauty of the dish needed no garnish, no elaborate presentation. The golden rice glistened beneath perfectly arranged pieces of tender chicken, rabbit, vegetables, and snails. The edges of the pan revealed the prized sauerkraut, that caramelized, crispy bottom layer that true paella lovers dream of. As Keanu placed the pan before the judges, he spoke simply, with humility. "This is for the people of Spain, with gratitude." There was a stillness in the room. No one moved. The aroma rising from the paella was intoxicating. The rich blend of saffron, smoky paprika, and deeply layered flavors spoke louder than any speech could. Chef Maria leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight and scent of the dish. With deliberate movements, she scooped a portion of rice and meat onto her plate. She tasted. Her eyes widened. Without a word, she took a second bite. Then a third. The other judges followed suit, their expressions shifting from curiosity to clear admiration. The camera panned across their faces, capturing the silent approval building with every mouthful. Finally, after several moments of tasting, Chef Maria set her fork down with purpose. The audience leaned forward in their seats, breath held, waiting. She turned to Keanu and spoke, her voice warm, sincere. "Keanu, this is not just a dish. This is a piece of Spain. The flavor, the balance, the respect. You have honored our tradition better than many trained chefs do. This paella speaks of heart, of understanding, and above all, of respect." The room erupted. The audience leapt to their feet in applause. Shouts of "Bravo!" echoed through the studio. Even members of the crew, who had seen countless episodes of the show, joined in the ovation. Keanu simply bowed his head slightly, a modest smile on his face. Across the room, Chef Laurent stood frozen, stunned. His eyes darted from the jubilant crowd to the judges' table. His elaborate dish, for all its technical brilliance, had fallen flat. The soul, the connection, the respect that true cuisine demanded, had not been there. And in that moment, the message was clear. Food was not about ego or spectacle. It was about heart. About honoring the culture it came from. And Keanu's simple, soulful paella had done exactly that, winning not just the taste buds of the judges, but the hearts of everyone watching. The studio lights shimmered across the stage, casting long reflections on the polished counters and gleaming cookware. The energy in the room was electric. A charged silence filled the space as everyone waited for the moment that had now come. The host, standing tall with a microphone in hand, glanced toward the judges' table one last time, confirming the final decision. His eyes twinkled. Even he could feel the significance of what had just taken place. What had begun as a simple cooking competition had become something much greater, a story of humility clashing with arrogance, of heart triumphing over ego, and of deep respect bridging cultural divides. Before announcing the winner, the host instinctively turned to Keanu. The entire studio, and no doubt millions of viewers watching from home, wanted to hear from the man who had managed to turn a tense, competitive evening into a beautiful lesson in grace. With a small, almost shy smile, the host asked, "Keanu, before we reveal the results, what inspired you tonight?" The studio fell into complete silence. The audience leaned forward, hanging on every word. The cameras zoomed in to catch Keanu's expression. He stood tall, yet humble, his apron still slightly dusted with grains of rice and flecks of saffron from the paella he had so lovingly prepared. Keanu looked across the audience, then back toward the judges. He spoke softly, not with the force of an actor performing a line, but with the sincerity of someone speaking straight from the heart. "Every cuisine tells a story," Keanu began, his voice even and calm. "When you dismiss a culture's food, you dismiss its people." There was a long pause. You could hear a pin drop. "Tonight," he continued, "I just wanted to honor Spain, with heart, not ego." The weight of his words seemed to land all at once. For a beat, there was silence, the kind of silence that comes only when truth strikes home. And then, the room erupted. The audience leapt to their feet in a standing ovation. The cheers echoed off the studio walls, louder and more passionate than any moment that had come before. Some clapped. Some whistled. Others simply stood, hands together, nodding in admiration for the respect and humility Keanu had shown. Even the judges, usually so composed in their seats, stood and applauded. Chef Maria Alvarez, known for her discerning palate and fierce devotion to Spanish culinary tradition, looked at Keanu with genuine warmth and respect. Her earlier praise now echoed in her expression. And across the studio, in stark contrast, stood Chef Laurent Dubois, alone at his station. His arms hung awkwardly at his sides. His face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line. The arrogance and bravado that had filled him earlier were gone, replaced by something far more human, the sting of a lesson well learned. He had mocked Spanish cuisine. He had laughed at the idea that a simple dish like paella could compete with his elaborate, modernist creation. He had believed that fame and skill alone would carry him to victory. But what he failed to understand was that food, at its core, is about connection, not ego. Now, as the cheers swelled around him, Chef Laurent could do nothing but watch as the man he had dismissed, an actor, a so-called amateur, stood gracefully at the heart of it all, having won the respect of not only the judges, but of an entire nation. Finally, the host raised the microphone once more and spoke clearly into the room. "And now, the winner of tonight's competition, by unanimous decision from our judges, Keanu Reeves." Another roar of applause swept the studio. Keanu smiled humbly, offering a small bow, his gratitude genuine. He hadn't come for the trophy. He hadn't come to outshine anyone. He had come to honor, and in doing so, had shown what true respect and humility looked like. It wasn't about winning. It was never about winning. It was about respect, for the culture, for the dish, for the people. It was about humility, stepping into a new space with a willingness to learn, not boast. And it was about the power of food to connect us, to remind us that behind every dish is a story worth honoring. As the cameras panned over the cheering audience, and the final shots of the night were filmed, one thing was clear. From that day on, Chef Laurent Dubois never again mocked another country's cuisine. The lesson he had learned that night, served not on a plate, but in the heart, would stay with him forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button for more inspiring stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the bell icon, so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.